What's going on, guys? I was bored, and I ran into this video about Monopoly. Now, everybody loves Monopoly, okay? Not everybody, but Monopoly is fun, right? So, I was never good at it. So, for other people that might not be good at it, you might enjoy this video. It's called AI Learns Monopoly Strategies. Go ahead and subscribe. Yeah, pretty cool channel. We're gonna watch this. Apparently he makes AI bots, and I think AI is cool, showing how smart a computer can be. Yeah, let's do it. It's gonna be sped up kind of fast, but yeah, my main concern is that you hear it and it doesn't drown me out. Okay.
Monopoly, a game that is fun for all ages and is a staple of many people's childhoods. This iconic game gave some people their best memories and their worst. Whether or not you look back on it fondly, the question has probably crossed your mind. What is the best way to win at Monopoly? Let's break this game down and see what we can find. The first thing you'll notice about Monopoly is that it isn't chess. You just aren't in control of everything your player does. In fact, when it comes to the movement of your piece, you have next to no influence on where the player can end up, which is determined solely by dice. Yes, you can exert some control over when you leave jail, but since you must make this decision before you roll, the event is still randomized. You cannot accept a dice roll. There's only one way you can influence your positioning. The chance that you roll a double goes up the longer you spend in jail. This means that you are more likely to move to an even square the longer you stay. It's not guaranteed, but it's all you've got. Let's talk about probability. Monopoly is primarily a game of chance.
Okay, so I'm gonna be talking about like, I let you know if I didn't know certain things. Yeah, I didn't know, like I didn't realize when it came to probability that the longer you stay in jail, it raises your chance of rolling a double. I mean, it's so simple, but it makes sense because if you have to roll a double to get out, then you're only going to roll a double the longer you're in there. Like the chance. Wow. Anyways, yeah, I'm a little slow.
Which means that even the perfect player won't win 100% of the time. Monopoly involves luck, and the key to playing it better is understanding how to be more lucky. The most efficient way to win at Monopoly is to build properties on sets. This increases the fine your opponents have to pay, and in turn, makes you more likely to win. Each set on the board has a different cost depending on how much money it makes back. Simply put, the more expensive the cost, the more expensive the fine. This can make it unclear to which set is the best, which if you want to play the game better, is definitely something you should know. To find out, we're going to introduce bot number 1. It buys everything, trades nothing, likes to build houses, and mortgages only when it needs to. I placed 4 of these bots onto the board and made them play a million games. This is what happened. Here are the win rates based on who went first, second, third, or fourth. You can see that players who go first have a slight advantage over players that go after them. This isn't news to anyone. What was surprising about this is how unfair Monopoly becomes as the number of players decreases. In a game of 4 players, there is a 5% difference between the first and the last player. In a game of 3 players, this difference jumps to 18%, and with 2, it's 57%. That is a massive difference. Now, it's important to note that these win rates only applied when the games had an outcome, which as it turns out, was not very often. Most of the games between these bots ended in a stalemate. Stalemates happen 70% of the time with 4 players. They also happen 42% of the time with 3 players, and 4% of the time with 2. This was mainly because none of them would trade. That meant the only way they could win was to acquire a set purely by chance. And if that didn't happen, then none of them would ever inflict enough damage to bankrupt the others, and the game would go on indefinitely. Interestingly, when there was only 1 player in the game, stalemates happened 100% of the time. This is the main reason you should join my Discord, because even numbers show that life is more fun with others. If we analyse the squares that the bots landed on the most, it tells an interesting story. We can clearly see that the most frequently visited place in the game
Life is definitely more fun with others. No doubt about that.
is jail. This is because there are many reasons you can end up there. Whether it be by card, rolling 3 doubles, landing on the go to jail tile, or choosing just to remain there, players often find themselves behind bars. In fact, the jail tile is so frequently landed on that the locations that precede it land more players simply by being nearby. Another thing we can see is the fall off that occurs as we go further through the tiles. The more turns you have, the more likely you are to be teleported elsewhere. Jail is a big reason for this, but the community chest and chance cards are also responsible for altering your journey. This makes properties at the end of the board harder to reach, except for Mayfair of course, or Boardwalk, or the Rue de la Paix, or whatever you want to call it. This also explains why the first few tiles in the game are so hard to get to, since players need to go all the way around the board just to have a good chance of landing on them. Probabilities help show what sets are good, but it's not conclusive evidence of which set is the best. To figure that out, we are going to introduce a new metric, the
I thought he was going to give me the cheat code. Hey, welcome everybody. We're learning how to play Monopoly with numbers and math, which makes it more fun.
relative win rate. This metric will show us how likely the tile in question is to belong to the winner. This will only include things that the player bought. Assets acquired from bankrupting others will not be taken into consideration here. Using this new metric, we can finally determine which set was the best for these bots. In first place, we have the Dark Blues, comfortably ahead of the others. This is no surprise, owning these properties is always a big advantage. In second place...
Okay, alright people, take notes. So the most important properties in listings for probability of winning is the Big Blues, and then the super inexpensive joints right around the corner.
We have the Browns. the Browns. Somehow the worst set on the board is now the second best set on the board.
Yep.
This honestly perplexed me for the largest amount of time, until I realised this. In a game without trades, getting a set is extremely difficult. You have to get extremely lucky in order to acquire a set with 3 properties, since this requires landing on all 3 without anyone else doing so. This task is just far easier to accomplish with the sets of 2, so it makes sense as to why they both have such a high win rate. Let's back up a bit though. If the Brown set is the second best set on the board, then you know you're not playing Monopoly right. And yeah, we aren't trading anything. Without it, the game is essentially a race to see who can get the first set, if any. With this in mind, let's construct a new AI that learns how to play the game perfectly.
Alright, y'all took notes. So it's the brown and the blue. So that's Boardwalk, and the brown joint is Baltic Avenue. Yep. The brown one is Baltic, and the blue joint is Boardwalk. So Boardwalk and Baltic. Aventura is yellow. Continental, I think, is yellow. Ventura, no, not Ventura. Damn, I ain't played Monopoly in a minute.
Now, I'm not going to pretend that I can just craft the perfect Monopoly AI manually, but you might be wondering how it's even possible in the first place, considering the amount of randomness going on. Knowing what strategy works better in this game is quite difficult. Comparing 2 AI with a single game is practically futile, since even the best possible AI can lose a game badly to a terrible one through bad luck. Just because $100 is won on a slot machine doesn't mean that the best strategy is to keep playing. It is for this reason that the good strategies must be recognised by playing a large number of games. This should allow for a fair comparison of players, but it still doesn't answer how we are going to create our new trading AI. To solve this, we are going to introduce an algorithm called NEAT, which stands for Neuroevolution of Augmenting Topologies. This algorithm combines neural networks with basic evolutionary principles.
Okay, right off the bat, I was interested because I like the thought of AI and seeing how smart it is. I like that because it makes video games more challenging. You know, the smarter the AI, the more well trained you can make a person training with the AI. So if you can make a perfect boxer, I'm talking about a boxer that obviously never runs out of stamina for training purposes, right? Never runs out of stamina. It's always at top stamina. Always at top stamina the whole fight, and you're sparring with this thing at top stamina the whole time, peak performance. I mean, that most powerful punch is always going to feel like that because it's coming the same way perfectly every time, accurately. That bot would be worth like $500 million. Like if you can make that, it would be worth about 500 million. Because all you have to do is find someone who's willing to train with it literally every single time they train, and they're by default going to become a great fucking fighter. Because you have the perfect fighter in front of it that'll just train unlimitedly. See what I'm saying? Like, AI is very important. Very important.
Of this, we are going to introduce an algorithm called NEAT, which stands for Neuroevolution of Augmenting Topologies. This algorithm combines neural networks with basic evolutionary principles. Neural networks are a recreation of the same mechanisms that allow our brains to think, which when combined with evolution, produces some amazing results. NEAT learns to accomplish things quickly, like solving an XOR gate, or balancing a pole, or solving an XOR gate while balancing a pole. There are almost endless possibilities. This ability also extends to gaining a deep understanding of complex games, which in this case will be Monopoly. In order for this to work, the networks need to know what's happening on the board. Neural networks process data using neurons, which receive sets of information. They then combine this information and pass it on to their neighbours. Information comes into the network from the input neurons and passes out of it via the output neurons. This is where we come in. For Monopoly, we need an input for every piece of information on the board, and an output for all the different actions we can take, which as it turns out is quite a large set. 3 input neurons are required for each player, 1 for position, 1 for money, and 1 for get out of jail free cards, for a total of 12 inputs. There are 28 properties on the board, each requiring 2 inputs, 1 to represent the owner, and 1 to determine if it's mortgaged. Additionally, 22 of these properties can be built on, so they all need an additional input to represent housing. We also require 1 extra input for each property so that we can let the network know context. For example, do you want to buy the Browns? Together, all these input neurons now represent the board entirely. For our outputs, there are 8 different decisions our Monopoly AI has to make. This includes buying, mortgaging, trading, unmortgaging, bidding, building houses, selling them, and deciding what to do in jail. A neuron will be created for each one of these. Altogether, these neurons now form an interface that can play Monopoly. Now we are almost ready to crunch the numbers. Just one more problem. Neat works by generating a population of agents that compete against each other. During each generation, each agent is ranked using a fitness value, which rates how good it is at the given task. Fitness values dictate how the next generation of agents is made, with higher scores being rewarded with more offspring. The scores are typically marked like an exam, where each agent attempts the same thing individually. But this can't work for Monopoly, because after all, it's a multiplayer game, so agents need to compete against each other. To account for this, fitness values will be assigned by using a knockout tournament scheme. Agents will be randomly assigned to a group of 4, and forced to play several thousand games in that group. Once the games conclude, the player with the most wins advances to the next round.
Alright, now how many of y'all fucking followed that shit? Let's go back a little. Okay. Once you start putting that shit on the download, what the fuck? Alright, hold on.
To create our new trading AI. To solve this, we are going to introduce an algorithm called NEAT, which stands for Neuroevolution of Augmenting Topologies. This algorithm combines neural networks with basic evolutionary principles. Neural networks are a recreation of the same mechanisms that allow our brains to think, which when combined with evolution, produces some amazing results. NEAT learns to accomplish things quickly, like solving an XOR gate, or balancing a pole, or solving an XOR gate while balancing a pole. There are almost endless possibilities. This ability also extends to gaining a deep understanding of complex games, which in this case will be Monopoly. In order for this to work, the networks need to know what's happening on the board. Neural networks process data using neurons, which receive sets of information. They then combine this information and pass it on to their neighbors. Information comes into the network from the input neurons and passes out of it via the output neurons. This is where we come in. For Monopoly, we need an input for every piece of information on the board, and an output for all the different actions we can take, which as it turns out is quite a large set. 3 input neurons are required for each player, 1 for position, 1 for money, and 1 for get out of jail free cards.
Okay, position, money, get out of jail free cards. Okay, alright.
For a total of 12 inputs. There are 28 properties on the board, each requiring 2 inputs, 1 to represent the owner, and 1 to
Wait a minute, hold on. Wait. So he said
take, which as it turns out is quite a large set. 3 input neurons are required for each player, 1 for position.
each player needs to know where they are,
1
how much money they have,
and 1 for get out of jail free.
and how many free attempts to get out of jail. Okay. Where you are, what you have, what you can do. But you can also do other things. Okay, anyway. So the input is what's given to you. So you're given a position, you're given a set amount of, you're given money, and you're given cards. So those are things that are given to the player. Alright.
Cards, for a total of 12 inputs. There are 28 properties on the board.
So it's 3 things, but it's 12 inputs for that.
Each requiring 2 inputs, 1 to represent the owner, and 1 to determine if it's mortgaged.
Position. Okay, so the inputs are what's given. So we're still talking about what's being given, whether or not you can own or mortgage. Okay.
Additionally, 22 of these properties can be built on, so they all need an additional input to represent housing. We also require 1 extra input for each property so that we can let the network know context. For example, do you want to buy the Browns? Together, all these input neurons now represent the board entirely. For our outputs, there are 8 different decisions our Monopoly AI has to make. This includes buying, mortgaging, trading, unmortgaging, bidding, building houses, selling them, and deciding what to do in jail. A neuron will be created for each one of these. Altogether, these neurons now form an interface that can play Monopoly. Now we are almost ready to crunch the numbers. Just one more problem. Neat works by generating a population of agents that compete against each other. During each generation, each agent is ranked using a fitness value, which rates how good it is at the given task. Fitness values dictate how the next generation of agents is made, with higher scores being rewarded with more offspring. The scores are typically marked like an exam, where each agent attempts the same thing individually. But this can't work for Monopoly, because after all, it's a multiplayer game, so agents need to compete against each other. To account for this, fitness values will be assigned by using a knockout tournament scheme. Agents will be randomly assigned to a group of 4, and forced to play several thousand games in that group. Once the games conclude, the player with the most wins advances to the next round. Fitness will be determined by how far an agent gets in the tournament, with one small exception. After the first tournament concludes, fitness will be determined by the tournament ranking, but relative to where the previous champion goes, who will compete again. So if an agent is able to get further than the former champion, it receives a higher fitness value. This way, new champions should always improve on their predecessors. Finally, we are able to run the algorithm. Speaking of which, let's run it.
Cheeky bastard. Yeah. He did that real fast. Like, writing code is fucking hard, okay? Well, I don't do it anymore. Asshole. Reminded me, getting PTSD. Fucking smoking some weed.
All tallied up, the AI played 11.2 million games against itself to reach this point, which if it was a human, would have taken about 1600 years. At this point, it's basically the god of Monopoly. So, the only question to answer now is, how did God learn Monopoly? The first thing the AI learned was that paying for jail is bad, and favoured cards and rolling dice. That was a great idea, said the AI. You know what else is a good idea? Bidding $3,000 on every property. And so it did just that, and lost horribly most of the time. After that, it soon discovered building houses and unmortgaging, and put them to good use. As the AI progressed, it began to start making more sensible decisions. It was becoming aggressive when it was winning, and passive when it was losing. This is when weird things started to happen. The AI then said, you know what, I figured it out, and started mortgaging everything it owned, without exception. And that's it. This strategy guaranteed a win every time. Monopoly has been— I'm just kidding, this obviously doesn't work. What happened instead is that every single game ended in a draw. This, however, didn't last long.
Alright, so he pretty much made it so that the little AI bots learn. Okay, awesome.
You know what's better than altruism? Winning. The AI paid off its insanely high debt to the bank and started winning again, re-enabling its sophisticated strategies from before. It also began to actively trade properties, and well too. I couldn't find a single trade that was uneven. At this point, the AI had progressed to the strength of an average human player, and played like one too. That's when the AI decided to pull its most spectacular trick out of the bag. Auction everything, and bid next to nothing. I have no words for this. Nevertheless, its deep understanding of the game had become very apparent. Here is our final trading AI's favourite properties, in all their glory. We can see here that its love for the browns has evaporated, and now the orange set stands as its favourite. It also loves trains, with the first train being its favourite property in the entire game. The red and purple sets are also well liked. The AI also seems to really enjoy Mayfair. Other than that, we can see that the other properties are pretty equal in terms of preference. And that's it. 2 weeks of training to agree with human theory. Nice to know that we aren't that bad at games, after all.
Alright. Okay, so the railroads and the orange. That's the key. Now if I find, hey, what's up? You want to play Monopoly? Of course, Naomi. Yeah, let's play Monopoly. We could do that tonight. Depends. We should see if we could do it live. That'd be cool. But appreciate y'all fucking with me. Your boy Preach. Your bitch want me. Have a good night. And Naomi, you better answer the phone. Touch.